All right. We are live. I think we're live on Facebook and YouTube, and Instagram is coming on right now as well. All right. Welcome, everyone. We've got a special guest, Allison Hare. Say hi.
Hi. Hey, Dr. Cody. Hi.
I'm glad to have you. And so this is a really fun live episode because one of my big purposes on this planet is to ignite and inspire people to their highest potential. And I've been doing that since I was a chiropractor. And since I moved into building the Fast 40 hormone reset company, I work with, primarily women who've gained 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds and can't get it off. And one of the reasons that, we were talking before, life started pushing me in this direction. And I never knew how much excess fat was really weighing people down, literally. And so I tend to attract very high-powered entrepreneurial women, and then not just entrepreneurial, but just really high-powered women. It tends to be my niche. I love working with them. So I'm part of a group called the Brand Builders Group, which is such an amazing community. And I've met so many incredible people, men and women. And so I've got a great connection through here, which is Allison, and she does something so incredible that is kind of an aligned mission of igniting and inspiring people to the highest potential. And I wanted to talk more and more about this. We're calling this the power of a podcast. And so, Allison, thanks for being on. And I'd love to know, you started telling me a little bit before about how you got into this, but how did you get into this, first of all?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Cody. I love meeting you. I can't wait to get to know you more. I've heard so much about you. I've seen your results in the people that I work with as well. And it's been really transformative. So it's really great to be here. Yeah, I have a degree in broadcasting. I have kind of an interesting story that I remember I was 12 and I was not good at sports, I didn't like to practice music. I had like no hobbies at all, which I don't know, kind of sucks. But I remember being 12 and I remember sitting in my kitchen with my mom and I was crying. And my mom said, "Allison, what's wrong?" And I said, "I am not good at anything. Like there's nothing I'm good at, all the traditional things." And it wasn't until I got to college and I took a voice and diction class. And I remember standing up and giving my first speech, and it felt like all the lights in my body turned on. And I knew that my gift was my voice. Like what was it that I was going to be good at? And the question has always been, how do you use, if the gift is the voice, how do I use this gift as a mission for good? And so I had taken, there are kind of two divergent paths where I'm really, really creative, but I was also raised by a mother of 6 kids who is a stay-at-home mom. And that mother told me, and this is for all the high-performing women out there, but my mom told me and my sisters, as the stay-at-home mom, "Allison, never rely on a man to make money. Always make your own." And she would say this over and over and over and over again. And for me, it clicked into like, I got to work hard. I got to work really hard. And I am never going to be in a position. My mother said that from a place of, she felt trapped. She felt trapped because she didn't make those choices and wanted her daughters to be free. And I had always picked the path of earning money. And like putting the creative self on a shelf and almost like stifling my voice kind of thing. And so I have been in sales for 25 something years. And that's how I made my career and made a ton of money and have, risen the ranks and, was working on the executive side of sales for many years. Got to a point of really profound burnout. And also knowing that there was so much more. There's so much political unrest, right? Like there was, as I had gotten into my 40s, and I realized, wait a minute, this isn't who I am. Like working in the corporate world. Not that the corporate world was not who I was, but it didn't feel like an authentic representation of who I was. And so for me, I felt like There needs to be more of a platform to make an impact in the world. And about 6 years ago, I got a promotional email about a podcast launch program. And I didn't even look at the price. I just said yes. And I said, I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to figure it out. And so I did. And it is called the Reinvention Room. It is a globally ranked award-winning podcast. I've interviewed people like Seth Godin, Jesse Itzler, Mariel Hemingway, the Academy Award nominated actress, people that I would have never, ever met in my life. And what had happened since then, I feel really passionate about using your voice, right? I feel like as females, a lot of times we are conditioned to tone ourselves down in a lot of ways. And even, even those that appear like they are bossy or too assertive or too, fill in the blanks, especially as females. A lot of times we're already editing ourselves, even though what's coming up is something more polished. And so what happens if you're able to use your voice, use your experience, your wisdom, your knowledge, your perspective to have meaningful conversations that change the world? And that has become my mission. So now I help people launch their podcasts in a sustainable, strategic, aligned way that isn't about like, I just need to get the first episode out there. I think most programs are kind of like, all right, just get those first few episodes out and off you go, where I think there's far more strategy and identity that needs to be put in there that is kind of blended with what kind of impact do you want to make? What audience do you want to be talking to? So that is like the nutshell version, Dr. Cody.
That's beautiful. What a great story. I was going to tell you about maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I went to go launch a podcast and I bought whatever podcast program and I went through the program and I realized, oh my God, this is way more work than I thought it was going to
work.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I never, I never fully went through it. And I also have friends that have podcasts, some of them who are like very successful and some are just dabbling in it, but the real successful ones gave me the real talk. And they're like, hey man, you need to be very dedicated to this. Like they're in like episode 300 and they're like their first year or two, there wasn't much return. And so, but now where they are is starting to really return. Now, I guess you could measure that return in different ways. How do you, how should you decide? How do you know if you should start a podcast?
It's such a good question. And I think the reason why you should not start a podcast is if you don't want to. If it feels like a massive weight on you, it's probably not the right time, or maybe you aren't being asked the right questions. Because the question I always ask, why do you want a podcast? Again, a lot of times people will come to me where they've got a great idea, but maybe a half-baked strategy. And that is the challenge. And I think in our minds, and I've been like this too, where you think if I just do all the work and get it out there, it's going to be like Beyonce dropping an album at midnight where people are just going to be excited and tell all their friends. But it really does require some strategy and some thought. And I almost like slow you down enough to get really, really clear on what is the purpose of it, so I can help you speed up so that it doesn't feel like it. And so it doesn't feel like massive work when you can bake it into your schedule beforehand and really, identifying what is the purpose of it. Is it as a way to meet people? It is such a high value networking tool. Is it a way that is going to amplify your brand? I'll tell you where I think a lot of people are struggling is that they're spending a lot of time and energy, perhaps in ways that don't have a return on investment that they would like. And I think we are inundated and flooded, as about social media in general of, people will tell you, Dr. Cody, you need to be on the social media platforms. You need to post every day. You need to hook them in 3 seconds. You should start a YouTube channel. Why don't you launch a podcast? Maybe you should build a course. And you're like, okay, because you're excited and you want to do it. But the challenge is that we're spending our time and energy, like you're not going to sell a $15,000 program on a 7-second, really clever, polished reel. You're just not. It requires time and trust to be built, and consistency, where you could sell a $15,000 program in a strong 25-minute conversation on a podcast where nobody knew you before. It is with a strong call to action at the end of it, if you do it right. And so that helps even as a guest on a podcast, as well as somebody that is hosting the podcast. It makes all the difference of how do you communicate that message effectively? So understanding, do you want it as to establish credibility, to establish authority? Do you want it as a place to unpack your ideas? If it is a place where you, sometimes people will come to me and they're like, I just want to share my story so other people can be inspired.
Right.
And I say, okay, it's a little broad, let's go deeper. Is there a business model? Because if it is just about sharing your story, I would not put any expectations around returns on it until you get really, really specific over who you're serving and what kind of inspiration. I think people get caught in the wandering generalities where they're kind of between lanes, where I help people kind of snap into a lane where they feel aligned and it feels like they can go the distance versus I just have this idea and I want to just get it out there.
I could definitely see that. I mean, I've seen a lot of podcasts. That's what it tends to be, is I just want to share my story. And I think you're right, because it's like, well, I'm sure it's a nice story, but we know this in the brand builders group, without truly identifying who's your ideal client, who do you talking to? And I think that's a really strong piece of advice you just gave, is like, who am I talking to? And also, what's the end result of doing this? And I wanted to ask you, and almost the way you were saying that was the way I was perceiving it, at least you saying it, was, I think people might build a podcast potentially to get new clients, but it sounds like it could also just be a really great way to actually nurture your existing clients also.
Yeah. It's more of a middle of the funnel thing. Again, unless you've got a very specific business focused podcast, there are ways where it becomes a lead generator for you. But generally speaking, it's going to be the middle of the funnel where people have the opportunity to learn what you're about. You can nurture it. It is very passive way in some ways. But my goodness, when people get on your phone and they want to do business with you, you don't have to sell them. They already know, because they've been able to experience what it's like and what you're about, and even just your values. I think one of the interesting things about podcasts in general, a lot of times people will say, well, I want it to be for everybody. And we all know that you've got to make it more specific for that. But I think the other thing is that people try and, they'll listen to Joe Rogan and say, well, I want to sound like that, or I want to sound like Mel Robbins. I want to sound like somebody who's not you. And nobody wants a carbon copy of you. Dr. Cody, I really do think the riches are in the niches. And I was at a podcast conference a few years ago, and there was somebody there, and this woman was like super passionate about game shows in the UK, and she lived in America. She launched a podcast about game shows in the UK. And you know what? Was it huge? Of course it wasn't. But was it huge for the people that loved it? Yeah, it was a really popular podcast. And so I always invite people to lean into, like, what is the one weird thing about you? Or I can talk about cults forever. I love talking about cults. I've got an interview right after this where I'm interviewing somebody else, and we're going to be talking about Ruby Frankie,
cool.
And so like for me, that is part of who I am, not as a cult leader, but somebody that is very interested in belonging and, like all the implications of society and all of that.
I'm going to take
So
that little
I
clip in
really
this
invite
episode.
yourself.
I'm going to take a
What?
little clip and go, I'm a cult leader. I'm going to take the little clip and clip it out. Like, I'm a cult leader. That's who I am.
Yeah.
And I'll put it on social media everywhere.
Right.
That's funny. Who would you say is your ideal person that you work with, that you want to work with, you're inspired to work with?
I'm obsessed with helping personal brands. So, like fractional executives or executives in general, business leaders, people that are looking to differentiate themselves as a business leader, whether they are working for a company or have their own business, and are trying to figure out how do I know, like I'm known within my circles, I've had success, but I know that there are so many people out there that I could deeply, deeply impact. They just haven't met me yet. They don't know I exist. And so the podcast becomes an opportunity to like build a bridge so they know you're there, right? And make it safe enough for them to cross. So I would say personal brands, business leaders are really my sweet spot.
Beautiful. What would you say to someone? Because they, I mean, in where I am, I have a lot of entrepreneurs around me, and I've had people say that there's podcasts they're just a dime a dozen, like and which is a little more of a negative thing, but also maybe also accurate. But what do you say to someone who's like, there's already just plenty of podcasts? Like, I don't know if I'm really going to get my word out there, my voice out there.
Yeah. Do you want to hear some insane statistics? Oh my God.
I really do. I was waiting today. I woke up, I was like, I want to hear some insane statistics. So please.
Allow me to deliver. So there are, any guesses how many podcasts there are out there?
Oh man, I know.
Let me registered podcasts.
I would think like thousands for sure. 10,000? I don't know.
There are 4.5 million, which feels daunting. It feels like everybody's got their own, right? Wow. But I started doing some research on this. Do you know how many active? So active means that they've published in the past 90 days. I'll give it to you. 455,000. That's it. So less than 500,000. And even beyond that, the number of podcasts that have published last week, just in 1 week, is 155,000. So while there are a lot of podcasts in the graveyard, and that can be daunting too, I feel like the reason why they've ended up in the graveyard is because there wasn't a lot of strategy going in. And early on when I've helped a lot of people launch their shows, I would attract a lot of hobbyists, like people that are like, me and my best friend were so funny. Everyone says we should have our own podcast, and like there's a market for that. That's great. I think it's really important, but they realize it's work. And if they don't see the Rogan numbers right out of the gates, where they're hoping the podcast fairies are going to smile down all their blessings on them, and they realize there is work. And so that's why there is so much emphasis for me on like, what is the purpose of your podcast and what is the promise of your podcast? Meaning, if somebody is going to tune in to your show, what is it they're going to walk away with every single time? And so I'll give you an example. And this is where it gets fun. This is where it allows you to have a little bit more of a North Star, and you don't have to complicate it. A lot of people feel like they have to have these like hours long conversations. And for some people, maybe it's a 5-minute podcast. Maybe it's 5-minute Friday. You can have all different variations of that's going to fit your audience. And so one of the podcasts that I helped launch is called The Commercial Break. The Commercial Break is number 1 in comedy improv for Spotify, for Apple Podcasts. It is charting, and it's such a funny podcast. So Brian Green, the co-host of The Commercial Break, it's so funny. Cool. His goal, his promise is that every time you tune in, you're going to laugh out loud at least once. And by laugh out loud, not like, Oh, that's kind of funny. Like you're going to spit the soda out of your nose. It's so funny, at least once.
Mm,
I have another client of the podcast, The Coaching Equation. And they only work with coaches. They help them become profitable business owners. Their promise is that they deliver a framework every time, something that is portable, that your audience member can leave with and tell their friends. And so I think like fine tuning of when is it right, or what is the model of this makes a huge difference of like how you differentiate yourself, and also leaning into your weird, like allow it to be your corner of the internet, not some formulaic show that you don't feel connected with. If you're
mm,
interested, people are going to be really interested. If you're not interested, people are going to they're going to know.
mm. This is such a fun conversation. I think you're Allison, I can, when I talk to people, I feel them. And I feel your enthusiasm.
You
I
feeling
feel
me?
your caring. Yes. I feel you're genuinely how much you want to be able to help people with this. And that's part of why really, I love having these conversations. They're just inspiring. I love working with people who generally want to inspire and help others. And that's just such a beautiful thing. I feel what you're doing. And so it sounds like you've got this thing down. You've got a system, you've got a framework. How do people, if someone's listening to this and they're like, maybe I should do a podcast, how can they get in touch with you? Like, what do you recommend doing?
Yeah, there are two things I would offer. One is that if you're interested and you're like, I have this idea, I would love to like bake it. My brain thinks in podcasts, so I offer a free clarity call. And so you can go to AllisonHare.com, ALLISON, hair like the rabbit, not on the head, but like HARE.com/free call. And I would love to talk to you. And if it is helpful, if you're thinking about um, starting a podcast and kind of figuring out what equipment, you can go to AllisonHare.com/equipment. And then you can download a free PDF where you can just click through and it kind of takes out all the guesswork for you.
Okay, that's super cool. And give me the URL again. I'm going to type it in here.
AllisonHare.com/free call. Allison with two L's and an I, and hair like the rabbit.
And then it's / free call, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I just typed it in our comments, and then since we're live, that'll keep it in there so people can see them on YouTube and Facebook. And I think you said you're on LinkedIn also. So
Yeah.
I forgot to say
LinkedIn
hi to
and
LinkedIn.
Facebook
Hi,
right now.
LinkedIn. Yeah.
Hi.
So Allison, this is so fun. Love your energy, and I knew I would. And this is really one of the first times we get to talk, which I think is so cool to just do it
I
live. It just
know.
makes
I
it real
love it.
raw. Yeah, it makes it real and raw. Exactly. So, thanks for being on. And I hope people are inspired by this conversation. I don't know if I can't think of one friend of mine who hasn't had the thought of, should I start a podcast?
Yeah.
Um, Even the ones that are like, dude, we're so funny, we should do this together. So I think this is super valid for so many entrepreneurs, so many business owners, and just so many people that are wanting to get like a message out. So thank you for being on, and I
It is such
appreciate
a
our time.
pleasure. And, I think if I could leave with one thing,
Yeah, please.
I think a lot of times we feel like the sprinklings of who we are kind of spread out through social media and in private conversations. Like you being able to speak your truth in a way where people can really consume it in more of a long form content.
Mm,
It is so liberating and freeing
mm,
to allow your voice to shine and not, keep it in,
mm.
right? Like have a way to communicate and connect with people in such a powerful way. It is truly an honor for me to be on this and streaming with you and meeting you. I can't wait to get to know you more.
No, that's so cool. Thanks for saying it that way. I can feel what you're saying about that. Yeah, consuming it in a longer format and almost being a little more like comfortable and safe with taking the information in. I totally feel what you're saying. So that's
Yeah.
amazing. All right.
Thank you.
Well, we'll sign off and say bye to everyone live streaming. And thank you so much for being on with me. So I'll see you soon, Allison.
Thank you. You
Bye.
too.
All right. Bye-bye.